for this wonderful series that we're doing. And I am the Vice President of Government Relations for the California School Library Association and an educator. And I'm welcome all of you to this third installment of an 8-part series on information by the California School Library Association, statewide CTAP, that stands for the California Technology Assistance Program, and the California Department of Education. I would like to extend a special thanks to Madera County Office of Education and their superintendent, Dr. Cecilia Massetti, for providing the Adobe Connect platform that allows us all to digitally hang out together. No pun intended towards Google with that statement. Also, I'd like to give a great shout out, a wonderful shout out to Tulare County Office of Education, who is also working in the background here to help bring this together. Also to the Orange County Department of Education for their assistance in this, as well as San Diego County Office of Education that also provided very important insights as we were crafting and bringing these wonderful folks together to help us all get a deeper understanding and a more profound understanding of information and digital literacy education. Wonderful. And also, I'd like to now extend my introductions. I have to admit, I'm a little nervous, and I'll tell you why. You know, when I'm dealing with the state superintendent's office, which was the first one, no problem. When I was dealing with the state attorney general's office, no problem. But when I'm dealing with higher education and I'm dealing with people with PhDs at the end of their name, it makes me nervous. I feel a little intimidated. I feel just, I don't know, not quite on the same wave, the same plateau that these guys are on. So since I've admitted that up front, I'd like to introduce and thank for being here Annette Marines, who is the instructional librarian for one of the University of California campuses. I believe, you can correct me later of which campus that is, but also Christina Cicchetti, educational specialist from the University of California, Riverside. So we have two fabulous, amazing higher ed leaders from two UC campuses that are going to provide for us insight to college readiness as it exists now and how they see it as into the future. And this should matter to all of us, especially when we realize that the audience today is primarily people inside of K-12 education. So we're really looking forward to your insights today. And also, another amazing person with us, the lead trainer on librarianship in the state of California, Leslie Farmer, who's at California State University, Long Beach. She's in media leadership. So I'd like to extend a, gushing, groveling welcome to all three of you for being here, because we really do value hearing, from higher ed. We talk about in K-12 this idea of vertical articulation and how important it is to connect kindergarten to first grade and first grade to the next grade, and even from elementary to middle school. But somehow we kind of end the road of vertical articulation when it hits 12th grade, and we rarely get to hear this voice. So welcome. And I do believe our first presenter is going to, up the bat, is going to be Christina. Am I correct on that? Christina, you're going to have to unmute your mic. Still not hearing you, Christina. Hey, Annette, can you speak in there so we can see if we can hear you?
This is Annette. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you just fine. So we'll circle back around to Dr. Farmer. Can we hear you?
I hope so.
Yes, we hear you just fine. So yeah, your sound, the balance is perfect. And Christina, could you try once again, please? No, we're still not hearing you, Christina. We heard a little something there. Well, like most things that include, technology, we do know that things don't always work exactly as we had intended. So if you don't mind working that problem on your end, Christina, I would ask Annette to, if you don't mind, to try to move this along until Christina can get back online and rudely interrupt us and say, hey, I'm here. So please go ahead and work that problem, and until then, we'll just keep this rolling along with Annette's perspective on college readiness. So go ahead.
Great. So we're supposed to set the context for defining information literacy and some particular standards and so on. And so I'm sort of jumping in when in the conversation in terms of writing and information literacy. So information literacy in practice at UC Santa Cruz in particular. So I'm going to get started with my little talk. And I wanted to begin by saying that unlike the CSU and community college system, the UC does not have an information literacy requirement. Despite this, librarians across the system work with their campus first-year programs, including writing and English departments, to meet the research needs of new students. As a library instruction coordinator, I work with the writing program at my university. We have traditionally held library research workshops for freshmen in their first-year writing courses. That is a 1-hour session for each course. So we're really meeting students in their freshman year, 1 hour. I work directly with the writing instructors and students. I also work with upper division, upper level subject-specific courses as another part of my job. So I'm building off of a question that Christina asked, which I guess she'll circle back around to, but Christina asked the question in her talk about well, basically, are students prepared for college-level research? And what I'm saying is that that's a complicated question to answer. Students leave high school having learned effective research strategies. However, the parameters of high school research assignments are vastly different from the ones assigned at a research university. This, in my opinion, is where the gaps begin. So learning is recursive, as far as I can tell. Learning to ride a bike for the first time in one's neighborhood is one context. Learning to ride a bike alongside cars presents a different context, and so on. Even though students arrive at college with research experience, they will have to relearn research for this new and different context, even the things students assumed they had already mastered. A typical research paper assignment in writing courses may look like this, as referenced by my slide. In upper level courses, this process may be condensed and may require specialized disciplinary formatting conventions. However, in writing courses, the assignments serve as milestones. So when I say assignments, I mean topic, proposal, prospectus, annotated bibliography, draft, final paper. These are the different assignments within the research paper process. Students demonstrate their level of engagement and successively progress toward the final product. The library workshop typically takes place around the time of the prospectus or the annotated bibliography. This sequence may look familiar to language arts teachers and others. Some key differences at the university level. The materials the students will have access to, they're the same specialized and proprietary resources that faculty use in their own research. So that's a step up from high school, I believe. And then the extent to which students are expected to engage in the research process, that is their analysis, their reasoning, the evidence provided, and so on. Finally, the instructors and their expectations. Instructors hold PhDs, masters in composition studies, or are current PhD graduate students. When faced with these new expectations, students may realize that their go-to strategies are not sufficient. We hope they realize that. So in their own words, I have a slide of some typical student comments that I often hear regarding research. And I'm not going to read them for you. I hope you can see them. These are not meant to belittle students. In fact, they offer insight into how to better help students. They also tell me that students may be assuming a different meaning of their learning experience than the instructors or I intended for them. So this is a whole other sort of segue, but for further reading on meaning making by undergraduates, I recommend a chapter by William Perry entitled Cognitive and Ethical Growth, the Making of Meaning, in which he summarizes his study of Harvard undergraduate students. This was studies conducted in the 1950s, but it still has a lot of relevance today. At UCSD, we have proactively responded to the first-year challenge by engaging with students and faculty through meetings, surveys, focus groups, pilots, and projects. Since 2005, this has been an ongoing process. As a result of this work, I have identified areas in the research process that hinder students' progress. Choosing a topic, communicating a topic, the good, bad, right, wrong, pro-con paradigms, detailed, overly descriptive report-style writing. While these may appear to be writing-specific problems, the overlap with information literacy is critical. They can actually be mapped to information literacy. But by understanding the overlap, librarians can help students make effective and efficient use of the library and its resources, while at the same time helping students strengthen their research paper. This process of communicating with faculty, it's really opened up the channels between faculty, students, and librarians, and that's been an excellent way to gain insight into our respective issues and problems, and to help develop inclusive, effective, and sustainable solutions. It's also been a really good way to raise a profile of the library. So when discovering these things, I feel like we've developed a joint venture here. Sort of in closing, I wanted to raise or bring into the conversation Allison Head and Project Information Literacy. This team of researchers have conducted numerous national studies on how students seek information. They have reached 11,000 students from 57 U.S. colleges and universities to investigate this question. So to go back to the question, are students prepared for college-level research? I think that Project Information really sheds light and offers clues to how students are coping once they enter colleges. And unfortunately, the outlook is not so good. In particular, this may be hard to see, but takeaways 2 and 3, using a small compass to navigate complex campus information, and the tendency to use risk-averse, consistent strategies that have been tried and true for students, respectively, indicate that in the face of frustration, students will continue down a path that is working against them. While at the same time, 80% of students report that they do not ask librarians for help. In order to get to a point where we are able to answer our question with a confident yes, we university librarians, teacher librarians, and school teachers and professors need to do more to open up the channels of communication to help make the information literacy standards usable and meaningful. So that's my message. Thank you.
Well, again, like I said when I opened this particular webinar with higher ed, I definitely had every expectation fulfilled by the things you said. Thank you for being so pointed and, it should be surprising that you backed up what you said with research. So nicely done. I'm going to check in with Christina and see if she is breathing yet. If Christina, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you are. Oh my goodness, I'm so happy. Yes, in fact, I've just now, I've returned back to the same decade with my age. Wonderful. Christina, please kick us off there with your...
Okay. All right. So I apologize, but well, I wanted to start with just kind of my informal description of information literacy. And I think information literacy is something that enables students to take charge of their own learning. And so it's really about lifelong learning. Children are born with this innate curiosity to figure out their world. And a colleague shared with me an example that her daughter had given her the other day. Her daughter asked her, "Mommy, do spiders have tongues?" So that's really a request for information, and it's not the sort of question that most parents would have the answer to right off the top of their heads, but it is a question that can be answered if you know who to ask or where to look up that information. So children quickly get disabused of the notion that mom and dad know everything, and as they grow, and especially as they get started in school, they need increasingly complex skills to find the information that they need. And so with information literacy skills, then students can answer these kinds of questions for themselves. And by the way, that brings us into the next point here, a very important skill that students will need to have when they come to college is the will to take responsibility for their own learning. So yes, the professors are going to provide information through their lectures, through assigned readings, but a professor may assume knowledge that the student in fact does not possess. And when that's the case, then the student needs to take the responsibility to go ahead and find that information, to fill that information need themselves. So the question then is, are students coming to college prepared to do this? One study done nationwide in 2005 found that 40% of college students said that the research skills that they were given in high school were not adequate to meet the research expectations that their professors had for them when they got to college. And 10% of those students said that this was not a small gap, that it was a large gap. And we've all known those students, right, who think that they know a lot about something when in fact they don't know nearly as much as they think they do. So it's not surprising then that an even greater number of professors said that their students had a gap in their research abilities. And 59% of college professors said that their students' research skills were inadequate. Now this was a nationwide study, given the fact that the state of California ranks 51st in the nation in terms of the ratio of school librarians, teacher librarians to students. I don't think that there's any reason to expect that California would be improving on those figures. So what are the research skills then that students will need when they get to college? This is a graphic that a couple of researchers in the field put together, and I'm really grateful that they allowed me to share it with you today. So on the left, they have listed the various kinds of sources that students will need to use in college in order to write research papers or other similar assignments. Now, because these researchers were working at a nationwide level, they mapped their sources to the national standards from the American Association of School Librarians. Had they been working in California, they probably would have used the Model School Library Standards for California Public Schools. If that's a document that you are not familiar with, I would really encourage you to take a look at it and familiarize yourself with it. It's available on the California Department of Education website. So looking at this graphic then, and the various sources listed there, let's start over there on the left with the websites. Here at the University of California, Riverside, most of the students that I'm working with come to college pretty acquainted with the World Wide Web. They've been on the web for a good portion of their life. They are familiar with the basic search engines, Google and what have you. But then going on down that column, okay, it says they need to construct an effective web search, okay? And typing in a few words and pressing the search button is not an effective web search. Yes, it gets you results, but does it get you the best results? Does it focus you in on the results that are most relevant to the topic that you're working with? So do students know how to narrow their search to a particular web domain, for example? Or do they know about using Google Scholar rather than the general Google search engine to focus on more scholarly, high-quality resources? And then they need to be able to evaluate website quality. In my work with professors across campus, when I am asked to do presentations for their classes, this is probably one of the most frequent requests that I get, is to talk to the students about how to evaluate a website, because professors don't feel like their students are doing a good job of that. Looking at some of those other sources, the articles, books, the reference books, notice that the first skill that all three of those require is the ability to navigate a library website. Now, a college or university library website is probably a whole lot more complex than the websites of the schools that you are working in, assuming that your school even has a library website, which it may not. And if you don't, are you perhaps teaching students to navigate the local public library website, for example? Notice under articles there, then they next need the ability to choose an article database. Now that sounds pretty straightforward, but realize that here at UC Riverside, we have more than 300 different databases for students to choose from. So if they have not used databases before, that's going to be a really daunting task for them to start looking at those and figuring out which one will be a good database to use for any particular topic that they might be researching. They also need to know how to construct an effective database search, similar to constructing an effective web search, except that databases are not designed to be searched in the same way that Google is designed to be searched. So if you take your Google search and you plop that into a database, you're not going to get the best results. So that's a skill then that if students are not actively taught that, they're not likely to figure that out on their own. So I wanted then to bring your attention to this quotation that kind of sums up for me the importance of information literacy skills when students get to college. This quote is taken from a document called Academic Literacy, a statement of competencies expected of students entering California's public colleges and universities. So it is not addressing specifically information literacy. It's talking about, you know, all sorts of skills that students may need to have when they come to college, but as you can see from the quotation, it certainly addresses information literacy. And this document was put together by a joint committee of the academic senates of the California community colleges, the California State Universities, and the University of California. So these were faculty members from various disciplines that put this document together. This is not a group of librarians talking here. So this group starts out quoting from a statement made by the Association of American Colleges and Universities, who said that technology has transformed the nature of the learning community and the definition of a classroom. It will continue to shift learning from the ability to amass or remember facts to the ability to adapt to constantly changing ways of finding information and then efficiently evaluating its validity and finally using it in ethical and creative ways. And that highlighted section of that quotation is basically a very succinct definition of information literacy, being able to find information, evaluate it, and then make good use of it. So this joint committee then goes on to comment on this statement from the AACU by saying that the importance of this shift away from amassing a knowledge base to acquiring techniques to find the knowledge cannot be overstated. Student success in college has as much to do with their ability to find information as to recall it. Okay, and you know, I think that is a really good summary of the importance of information literacy when students get to college. So I'll turn the time now over to Leslie.
Thank you, Christine. So we're moving ahead or behind as we then turn the telescope to the other end to see what's happening in K-12. Know that right now I'm a professor at California State University, Long Beach, where I teach folks how to become librarians, and specifically teacher librarians in pre-K through 12 settings. So I think it's important for us, you know, to look at the context. And I have to say as well, I've also been a librarian at community colleges and at CSULB. So I've seen what happens when there is or there is not articulation. So even though information literacy is a really important, you know, piece, it doesn't live in a vacuum. And while, you know, K-12 and all education exists for students, and that is our lodestone, we have a lot of things that drive us. So what drives K-12 schools? Quite frankly, it's the higher ed A through G requirements that often drive the curriculum, particularly in high schools. And increasingly, the high-stakes testing is driving how we share and deliver that curriculum. And then how students do their annual yearly progress, and now, you know, the ability to meet Common Core standards across the curriculum are driving administrative decisions. And then we have state and federal budgets that drive what kinds of choices that we can make in terms of resources and their allocation. But the core folks, quite frankly, are our teachers, you know, so they're really passionate about their students, they're really passionate about their subject matter, and they also want to keep their jobs. So that drives them, and, you know, the students basically are, you know, interested in themselves and in their self-realization and in their futures and, you know, about their friends and their colleagues. So that's what motivates us, or those are some chief things. And you'll see that sometimes, you know, there's some fear that's involved, you know, some worries that are involved. You know, what if I don't, you know, graduate? What if I am laid off my job? So that kind of impacts how we sometimes look at information literacy, and it can sometimes feel as if it's icing on the cake rather than the core and the heart of education. And quite frankly, the more that we can drive ourselves through positive motivations, it's probably a little more productive. So let's take a look at what's happening in K-12. Yes, students are reading. It's a huge thing, and particularly in terms of comprehension of text. But the problem is that oftentimes it's what we call a closed universe. That is, that students don't have a lot of choice in terms of the materials that they can use, or the opportunities for them to locate materials on their own, to choose their own authentic questions, for example. It's often quite structured. And so they don't get great practice in learning how to examine what we call novel text. Novel as in new to them. And still in education, oftentimes folks have a perception that reading is something that belongs in language arts rather than a systematic approach across the curriculum. Common Core may change, that particular kind of thinking. And quite frankly, teachers are now getting training with that kind of a mindset. In terms of research then, students still are usually asked to take notes, to summarize what are the main ideas, perhaps compare a couple of different points of view. But in terms of actually generating credible information, that's rather unsystematic. And I have to tell you that the research says that a lot of classroom teachers do not do most of their educational decisions based on evidence-based research that they read, and they'd rather look at best practice of their colleagues, for example. So there isn't that same kind of deep understanding about the usefulness of research and to do action research themselves, which would be a very good practice and a very good model then for our K-12 students. And then within the general idea of information literacy, we also have to look at some of the other kinds of literacies. Technology literacy, we still tend to think of it as a tool, like, so today we're going to learn how to do PowerPoint, that kind of thing. In terms of visual literacy, media literacy, which really means mass media literacy, there's not a lot of emphasis on that, and yet that's a huge amount of the kind of information that students contend with every single day. So there is sort of a disconnect sometimes between the school learning and school testing and then what students have to prepare for in terms of the rest of the time outside of school and perhaps beyond formal education. And again, I've also mentioned that just non-textbook information just is not addressed real systematically. There isn't that same kind of a scope and sequence, even though there are the model school library standards now. And so we really need to be looking at that more carefully, and they map very well, by the way, with the Common Core standards. Then on top of it, the whole issue of metacognition, thinking about thinking, knowing what kinds of questions to ask under different kinds of circumstances, and having students learn how to self-regulate their own learning is not very systematically addressed. And yet those are the kinds of things that they are expected to do when they walk into the college halls or the college online course experience. And sometimes, the issues of like what you can do and what you should do also are not addressed beyond the simple things of like don't cheat. So that is part of information literacy, is that responsible use of using information, manipulating it, and generating it. So why are there these problems? Well, one of the main things is that information literacies and digital literacies usually are not mapped out as a part of a curriculum or as a separate part that's melded with the rest of the school objectives. And one reason for that is because a lot of teachers aren't very comfortable, teaching those. And part of the reason teachers aren't very comfortable in teaching information digital literacy is because they weren't trained in it themselves. And working in CSUB, I can tell you that it's a tricky thing to be able to include those as part of the myriad pieces of information, knowledge, and skills that trained teachers need to have. And then on top of that, you think like, oh, but there's someone. Yes, teacher librarians. They are trained in these kinds of knowledges and skills and dispositions. But, California doesn't have as many teacher librarians as it should, as Christina kind of hinted. These folks are experts in the field, and right now they are going to be having the special class authorization, so they actually can be teachers of record, in those subject matters. So it's a really, good time you know, we have a wonderful opportunity, you know, right now, and I think that, you know, these sets of seminars are just give us a wonderful opportunity to do that next step, because can we wait for students until they are 18 years old in order for them to learn how to think and to generate credible knowledge across formats? I hope not. So it seems like it makes sense that every school at every level needs to have a full-time, trained, effective teacher librarian who can coordinate the resources that students need to get their hands on, and they can coordinate that instruction, you know, the conditions to optimize learning for students in terms of information and digital literacy, and how that ties into the rest of the curriculum. And that also includes then training the entire school community, the teachers, administrators, and parents as well, so that all of the students can meet the Common Core standards, that they'll be ready for the college or whatever their plans are when they leave school. And I also have to tell you that part of this means articulation with higher education. So we're doing that right now professionally, again, not as systematic as we can, but today's seminar is a really good example of how we can talk together. We can leverage this time. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to take those next steps and, you know, help plan the conditions for our students' future, because it's not only their future, it's also ours. Thank you.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank all three of you for that an amazing and deep, it's a very deep presentation that you just gave. We had run a bit over the time frame that we wanted to do.